Okay.
Hello, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of the Hamptons, Shelter Island, and the North Fork primary election debate among the 5 individuals who are vying to be the Democratic Party nominee in the election for New York State Senate for the 1st District. Before we start, let us pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the
to
republic
for
which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
My name is Kathy Peacock, and I'll be the moderator this evening. The League of Women Voters is a trusted, nonpartisan, political, national organization. While we never endorse candidates or parties, we're respected for the work we do sponsoring candidate debates. Usually they're held in large auditoriums with live audiences, but unusual times call for unusual solutions. We thank Charles Certain and CTV Southampton for providing us with the technology to hold this debate live and to make it available via YouTube so that everyone will be able to watch before the election. We thank the candidates for agreeing to participate in a Zoom debate, and we thank you all for watching. The election is June 23rd. If you're a registered Democrat, an absentee ballot application will be mailed to you, or you may apply to the Board of Elections for one. Alternatively, you can vote at your convenience at one of the early voting sites, or vote on June 23rd at your normal voting location. Just vote. On to the debate. The candidates in alphabetic order are Laura Ahern, Valerie Cartwright, Nora Higgins, Skylar Johnson, and Tommy John Schiavone. The debate format will start with the candidates having 2 minutes to make an opening statement. Then I'm going to ask a series of questions, and each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond to every question. In addition, each candidate will be allowed 3 opportunities for a 1-minute rebuttal to a response from another candidate, or to add to their initial response after all the candidates have responded to a question. They'll indicate their desire to do so by holding up their hand. After all the questions, each candidate will make a 1-minute closing statement. Since we couldn't have our usual coin toss, the candidates will respond in alphabetic order. The first person will make her opening statement first. After that, they'll rotate who goes first in answering a question and giving the closing remarks. Barbara McClancy of the League will be the timer. On to the opening statements. And Laura, you're first.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Today is our 100th day with COVID, a human catastrophe that took over 24,000 lives and put 16% of us out of work in New York and closed many small businesses. It's also day 15 of protests demanding social change after the horrific murder of George Floyd by those sworn to protect us. Both COVID and Floyd's murder have forever changed our nation and our state. Senate District 1 needs a leader like me who can help us heal, rebuild our economy, and reunite us after 4 years of Trump's divisive reign. Even before COVID, we were losing our fair share in Albany, and now we're having to fight even harder. I'm a fighter with proven results. I'm a licensed social worker, a practicing attorney, a military mom, and the executive director of the Crime Victim Center. For nearly 25 years, I have fought to keep us safe and provided vital services to those in need in our community, including to victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, hate crime, gang violence, and elderly, minor, and disabled victims. Over 20 years ago, I founded the organization from a room in my home and built it to be a full-service agency with 30 full-time staff. I'm a leader, and I have a demonstrated record of bringing stakeholders together to problem solve and take action. I've developed and implemented community-based programs achieving remarkable results, reducing sex offender recidivism by 75% and domestic violence arrests by 20%, facilitating the return of over $6 million to crime victims right here in Suffolk, and educating over 200,000 children. I went to law school at night for 5 years while working full-time at the agency, graduated with honors, and received the Martin Schwartz Award for Excellence in Civil Rights. I bring 25 years of experience drafting and passing legislation on a local, state, and federal level. I'm a fighter who wins for our community, and I have a 25-year track record of delivering for Suffolk County. I'm asking for your support so I can fight for us and win for us in Albany.
Thank you, Laura. Valerie, you're next.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Charles. I just want to say thank you for giving us this opportunity today, especially during this time where we're fighting a pandemic. We want to make sure that we have as much access as possible for everyone to learn about our platforms. First, again, my name is Valerie Cartwright. I am a mother of a 3-year-old and I am a wife. I'm an elected official in the town of Brookhaven, the second largest town in the state of New York with approximately 500,000 residents. I have been the only Democrat on the town board for the past 5 years. In terms of my professional background, I'm an educator teaching in a graduate program at St. Joseph's College. I'm also a civil rights attorney. Spent over 15 years fighting for the rights of others. I left a large civil firm on Long Island in order to fight for the rights of others through criminal defense and civil rights work. I have protected the rights of those who've been violated. I continue to do so and push for change with respect to systematic discriminatory practices that exist on Long Island, in our state, and in our country. I've marched, I've protested, I've engaged in all forms of activism and have been the voice of the voiceless since I was a small girl living at home in Queens, advocating for my grandmother and my aunt who did not speak English, as I'm first generation American. My parents derived from Haiti. You see, as a Black woman, coming from immigrant parents, I had a father who served in Vietnam as an immigrant, and I understand firsthand struggle, despair, discrimination, and racism. I entered this race for state senate because I have the experience and the passion to deliver for this district. I have the experience as a lawyer, an educator, and an elected official. And I'm looking forward to making sure that Eastern Long Island moves forward, New York moves forward. And I believe that I am the best candidate, bringing my motivation, my passion, and my experience to this role. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Nora?
Hello, and thank you again for this opportunity. To Barbara, Kathy, and Mr. Certain there, thank you very much. So I actually grew up here on Long Island. My dad was our sole provider for 6 children. I was the last and grew up with hand-me-downs. So I thought I was a second-class citizen somehow, but at any rate, it was a good experience. We learned how to share and do without. And I went to nursing school at the age of 18, and I went over to Stony Brook Hospital at the age of 21, and I've been working there since. And I worked in a variety of care areas, predominantly obstetrics and gynecology. So as far as empathizing for rights of women, I've seen firsthand how women are treated in regards to their marriage, their motherhood, their daughterhood, and how they're treated in the spectrum. I've also been educating young adults in the nursing program for the obstetrical rotation for the last 20 years. And I became a union activist approximately 23 years ago after I delivered my twins. I'm a mom of 4 kids myself, and had something not go quite right. My union helped me, and I decided, you know what, if I'm a pretty outspoken person and I needed help, there must be others out there that won't speak up, that I can help them. And that's what I've enjoyed doing. I became an elected official for my union back in 2015, the regional coordinator, which means for Long Island, there's about 5,000 members that I oversee and help and try to provide engagement activities for and education. And elsewise, as my children grew up, I always tried to be involved with their lives. I was a Boy Scout leader, a Cub Scout leader. I taught religion to all my children and their friends. And,
Thank you, Nora. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Skylar, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Skylar Johnson. First of all, I want to thank everyone for watching tonight, for taking time out of your very busy lives to participate in the electoral process. We need more people doing that. In these debates, we tend to talk a lot about the past. It's time that we speak about our future. In my campaign, I've made one thing clear. I'm going to run with policy. I'm not just going to let you guess at what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, because that's what we need from our candidates and that's what we need from our elected officials. If you go to my website, you'll notice that we have about 14 policies listed that detail exactly what I plan to do in Albany on everything from healthcare to women's rights to disability rights to housing. My healthcare plan involves passing the New York Health Act to make sure that no one in New York ever dies because they can't afford healthcare. Every one of my plans is meticulously researched, discussed with experts, and thought out to make sure that I'm providing the best for New York. I will never say that I'm the best candidate because I do not believe that is for any of us to decide. However, as you make a decision about who you want to vote for this year, I do want you to consider who has the policy to deliver for you in Albany. I want you to consider who's representing your values best and who is being transparent with you. And that's what I'm going to ask you to listen for tonight. We all have some varying ideas. Some of us contrast on things more than others, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to decide who best represents your values. And I hope that I have the opportunity to explain to you exactly what I want to do in Albany and how we're going to work together to build a better New York. I'm really looking forward to this discussion because there are so many important things that we need to do. And it's time that we delve into these issues and do a deep dive on what's facing Long Island and how we're going to solve it. And I hope that you'll give me the opportunity to do that in Albany. Thank you.
Thank you. Tommy John, you're next. You are muted.
Everyone, I want to thank the League for holding this debate tonight. Our democracy must move on. The nation currently is in a state of national reckoning. We are facing over 400 years of systemic racial discrimination in our society, as well as a pandemic. In addition to the issues that we are facing here in the 1st Senate District, we need good government. We need leaders in government who do have the experience, do have the knowledge, and do have the energy. Decisions need to be made. Issues need to be addressed. I was raised here in the 1st Senate District. I spent my career as a teacher in Brookhaven town. I am from the East End of Long Island. I've held a number of seats in government, from fire commissioner to village board to zoning board to seat on the school board as well. Currently, I am the liaison to the town of I am a councilman in the town of Southampton, and it's important that we have that kind of experience representing us in Albany. I've been to Albany. I have been there. I've lobbied for school funding. I've also worked with my own teachers union for our rights in education and for pro-education stances. I was a teacher for 30 years. But on top of all this, and probably most important, I am a father. I am a husband. I am a brother. I am a son. I am embedded in the community. I am an active community member, and I am running and I serve in government to make this a better place for all of us. And I welcome the discussion tonight, that we can address the issues that are facing the 1st Senate District, and that the people, the Democrats, choose the candidate that is going to represent them the most and get the most for the 1st Senate District in Albany, which is so crucial to all of our lives in so many different ways. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go on to the questions. Valerie, you're going to be answering the first question first. The economic outlook for millennials is bleak. What can you do to create good job opportunities to keep our young people here on Long Island?
Well, thank you very much. First, I think that it's important that we recognize that young people don't want to stay on Long Island if they can't afford to stay on Long Island. So we need to make it affordable. Affordable housing is a key component. When I first came here in Brookhaven and purchased a home about 16 years ago, I had to purchase with a girlfriend of mine because that was the only way I was able to actually purchase within this area. I think it's important that we continue to speak to the youth about, and I say youth, and to millennials, youth, about what it is that they need here. Affordable housing. I've spoken to the minority millennials that they have put forth legislation with the Suffolk County to make it so that those who are looking to buy homes are put in situations where they can do so and qualify for loans. This was put before Suffolk County, and unfortunately, it did not go anywhere. We want to make sure that there is opportunities that are presented, not only from a perspective of being able to qualify to buy homes. We have all different types of housing that's here so people can stay on Long Island. We're talking about affordable housing through purchase opportunities, rental opportunities, different types of zoning, which is put in place so that they can actually stay here and live here and actually work here.
Thank you. Nora?
Thank you very much. So yeah, this one is kind of pulls at my heartstrings. As I told you, I have 4 children. They are between the ages of 23 and 27. I also have 4 stepchildren between the ages of 25 and 31. Other than the 31-year-old who has 7 children of her own, everybody wants to leave Long Island. They do not want to stay. It's difficult for them. My daughter just moved into an apartment this week, actually. She's one of 4 people. 4 people have to live in space that was designed for 2 people, maybe really even 1 person. And she wants her independence. She'd always stay home, but that's not what she wants to do. She wants her independence. And we really need to redistribute what money is coming to Long Island. We definitely need to be supportive of the millionaire tax, the billionaire tax, the pied-à-terre tax. We need to then invest those money in areas that we can actually entice our young to stay and to prosper here. This is an area where they can stay and thrive and survive when they have the resources. They don't have them at this time.
Thank you. Skylar?
So this is an extremely important issue. Obviously, I'm the youngest candidate here. I'm 19, and I'm experiencing this for myself as well as with my friends. Valerie is right. Housing is a key component of this issue because people do not have an affordable place to live. On the island, a lot of people are forced to live in their parents' basements until they're 30-something because there's no affordable place to move out, and that's unacceptable. So my housing plan actually utilizes a lot of the vacant homes on the island and throughout New York to get people into homes, and I'm hoping to discuss that a bit more later. But there are some other key components to this issue. One of them is our education system. Our education system is too expensive. People cannot afford college and they get saddled with student loan debt. And it's not fair and it's ridiculous. And it means that the quality of life is largely going to be dependent on the economic status in which you were born in. For the first time, people are not better off than their parents were. And that's something that was almost a given in America for a very long time. So we need to make it so that way college is affordable or free for people living in New York, because then they won't need to leave as soon as they graduate to try to build a life while paying off student loan debt. The problem on the island, because the original question was about jobs, and the problem on the island is not that we don't have enough jobs, is that the jobs don't pay enough. What we need to start doing is pulling tax breaks away from giant corporations that are gonna come and stay in New York anyway, and start putting them towards start putting that same tax money towards creating a living wage for people. If people have high wage jobs, they will not need to leave Long Island because they can afford to stay here. Again, the problem is not that we don't have jobs, is that the jobs don't pay enough. Can you imagine if we gave those tax breaks to young people and people of color looking to open up businesses, or to current business owners looking to pay their employees more? We could help fix the economy of New York and keep young people on the island and out of some sort of economic exile that we forced onto them.
Thank you, Skylar. Tommy John?
Thank you. I've spent a career getting young people ready for our economy. It's what I did. It was my dream. I was a teacher, and I did this in Central Moriches for 30 years. And I have to say, running and meeting a lot of my students, they're here on Long Island. And it taught me, one of the things that it taught me is that a good education is absolutely imperative. And the schools on Long Island do offer a good education, but the education needs to be equalized between all of the district in the first Senate district. I believe that schools need to be retooled a bit so that we are teaching more vocational skills, job-ready skills for young people. There is nothing wrong with being an electrician or a hairstylist and starting out at an early age, if that is what a person wants to do. Also, to teach for college-ready students as well. As far as affordable housing, that is imperative. We have an incredibly strong market here on Long Island, and I believe that we need to do a number of different, take a number of different approaches to solve the affordable housing program issue. On the east end of Long Island, we have a community preservation fund. We're looking at that for housing. It would give the towns different tools to provide housing the way they want to, based on a public referendum, and it would allow the towns to effectuate that affordable housing that we need. In addition to that, I strongly believe in mixed use housing. We need to keep our young people on Long Island. We need healthy communities here on Long Island. We need people of all ages, young, middle-aged, older folks here on Long Island. I want to see little kids in the street with young couples walking around and enjoying this island the way I did in my formative years. So thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
Affordable housing is absolutely key. It's essential if we're going to maintain the viability of our community and keep our children here. And each of the towns within SD1 have different needs, but we all share the same housing problem. Our children and our seniors just can't afford to live here, and workers who are representing the backbone of our communities can't afford to buy a home. They can't afford to raise their family here. The lack of affordable housing is actually resulting in gaps of services. So those folks who are teachers, police, firefighters, medical staff, and retail workers can't afford to buy a home and start their families. So it's a vicious cycle, and the rental market doesn't help us anymore. So, I mean, it's key. Affordable housing is key, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit about some of those solutions later on tonight. But also we need to keep our millennials here, make education more available, more affordable. The federal government should not be making money on student loans. That's something that has to change. And we also should be helping our trade unions. As Tommy John said, it's important. Not everybody is going to go to college. Maybe they want to become a plumber, or maybe they want to become a steam fitter. So we need to help our trade unions conduct outreach to attract those kids that are not interested in college. Another issue too is we should really be paying a real living wage, and also ensure that healthcare for all of our kids continues. They lose it at age 26, so we want to make sure we have healthcare for all, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And we want to work with our federal partners to fund affordable housing programs and get our SALT deduction back. We can no longer deduct our state and local taxes, which is really a burden for a lot of homeowners.
Thank you. The next question, Nora, you're going to be answering it first.
Okay.
The New York Health Act before our state legislature needs only one more sponsor to achieve a majority and passage. Would you commit to adding your name as a sponsor? If you do not support the New York Health Act, specifically, how will you propose to cover the uninsured and help those underinsured who cannot realistically use their insurance because of high deductibles and co-payments?
So again, being a healthcare provider, I definitely want to see, yes, I would sign on it. I definitely want to see that everyone is covered completely, that there's not one person that will hesitate from seeking medical care because of what may or may not be in their wallet. It is very, very important that, especially here with COVID, I know there were so many people that was a concern for them. And they stayed in their communities, and they got other people sick in their communities. And, you know, because somewhere in the past we went wrong and greed kind of took over and we did not look to take care of our fellow man, you know. And again, this is the root of all evil. With everything that's been happening with regard to people protesting about Mr. Floyd, you know, people just have to understand, I can tell you firsthand, in the operation room, we are all the same on the inside, okay? There is no difference on the inside. And we are all human, and we have to respect that. And we have to do all we can to make sure that everyone is being taken care of along the way and not to leave anyone behind.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Skylar, you're next.
The New York Health Act has actually been my top priority since day one. I'm proudly endorsed by Long Island activists, which top priority is to get the New York Health Act passed. I wanted to make sure when I was supporting this bill that I fully understood the bill, because unfortunately, a lot of times when people run on proposals like this, they don't fully understand the bill. I actually was able to sit down in a meeting with Long Island activists and Assemblyman Richard Gottfried, who is one of the authors of the bill. This bill is affordable, it's sustainable, and it's good for New York. No one should ever die because they cannot afford healthcare. That's egregious. We cannot wait for the federal government to provide healthcare. We took some steps with the Affordable Care Act, but it's not enough. And every day that's the only thing we have in place, people are dying. 5% of New York is uninsured right now. That's about 1 million people. With the COVID crisis, it proved that tying healthcare to employment is an awful idea, because as soon as people are laid off, they lose their healthcare. I would absolutely co-sponsor the New York Health Act because we need to get it in New York, and we can lead the way for the rest of the nation and for a federal plan. The bill is designed to be self-sustaining, as well as to put money back into the pockets of everyday New Yorkers and tax the people who can afford it. But the middle class will see economic breaks, save a lot of money, and be able to invest in their regular lives. The COVID crisis has disproportionately affected minority communities, and part of that is because they do not have the same access to healthcare. This bill would ensure that every single person in New York had the same quality access to healthcare. It would also mean that all immigrants could get healthcare regardless of immigration status, which will save lives. This bill will be incredibly good for New York. It'll save us money. It'll allow people to stay in New York, increasing our tax base. Overall, it'll be good economically, it'll be good morally, and it'll be good for the health of New York. So absolutely, I can't wait to sponsor it. Last thing I'm going to say, I pledge not to take any money from the insurance lobby, because the insurance lobby will fight tooth and nail to prevent this. And I hope that my fellow candidates, 3 of whom haven't answered, are going to say the same thing, because none of us can pledge to fight for real healthcare if we are taking money from insurance lobby. So I hope that all 3 of you will say that.
Thank you, Skylar. Tommy John.
Thank you. Health insurance and healthcare in New York, it really has been put under a microscope with COVID-19. We found out that different communities had different levels of coverage. That is unacceptable. Everyone in New York needs to be covered. I believe that socialized medicine, if we are going to do it as a people, and when I say a people, in the United States of America, that has to be done on the national level. Currently, New York State pays out, this was before COVID. Currently, before New York State pays out, more than $26 billion to other states. We pay for the medical programs in other states. And with our $15 billion budget deficit, $13.6 billion budget deficit as we speak, for now, for this year, the New York Health Act is not ready. That's my opinion on that. I believe that we as a people will get there, that we in the United States will get to either single payer or some kind of socialized medicine. I don't think that people should be making money off of procedures. The fact that somebody makes some profit off of appendicitis attack just bothers me. However, this insurance industry is more than 9% of New York's economy. And at this time, right now, it is going to be very difficult to transform that in this amount of time. So will I go up to Albany and vote yes? At this time, I'm going to hold back that vote because of the reasons that I stated. I believe that the Affordable Care Act works. President Obama had it right.
Thank you. Laura?
Thank you.
You're up, Laura.
Am I muted? No, right?
You're okay.
Okay. Healthcare is, as everyone, and we all agree, healthcare is a human right, and everyone should have access to quality healthcare and low-cost prescription drugs, regardless of their immigration status. And COVID-19, as others have said, has highlighted the need for us to rework our entire healthcare system and address these inequities. I supported Obamacare, which Trump continues to try to dismantle, and I supported public option, as do our congressional candidates. However we get there, All of us deserve quality healthcare, and all states have to have equal benefits. And that's why healthcare needs to be addressed on a federal level. You have my commitment that I will work with our state and federal representatives to ensure that that 5% of New Yorkers that don't have coverage get access to coverage. But so the problem in New York, right, is that New York Health Act has been lingering for years. It's not likely to pass. And even the majority leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, has said that the state Democratic caucus just disagrees on how we're going to get coverage. We all, as Democrats, feel very strongly that everyone has to have access to quality healthcare, and COVID has even exemplified that even more. But the obstacle we have is that there are folks who have negotiated their insurance benefits as part of their compensation package. You can't just take that away from them. They're not going to be agreeable to that. And in New York alone, if New York alone passed the New York Health Act as it is right now, there's a very real possibility that we're going to see folks coming in from other states who have had less beneficial programs in their state, and New York taxpayers who are already out of work and lost their social deduction, and small businesses that are already struggling to stay alive will have additional financial burdens placed on them. So we all agree, it's outrageous. We have to get folks quality healthcare. Everyone, every New Yorker must have that. It's a human right. And I'll fight with my state and federal partners to make that happen. And I'm open to listening and learning.
Thank you, Laura.
Fighting.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Valerie, you're next.
Thank you, Kathy. So I think that many of us agree that our federal government is failing us. And as a state, when our federal government fails us, we must step in. It is our responsibility to take care of our citizens. It's our responsibility to take care of all of those that are within our state. I wholeheartedly support the New York Health Act. I will co-sponsor the bill. I will advocate for its passage. And as an elected, I will educate the constituency on the bill. It is not enough to say that it is a fundamental right or an absolute right and not say that you are going to vote for the New York Health Act. The time for the passage of this act is now. There can't be any more delay. In New York, if someone's arrested and can't afford a lawyer, we provide them one. If someone is sick and can't afford a doctor, we say, oh, well, you don't have the proper insurance, or you don't have enough insurance, or you're not a citizen. That's a problem. We must move forward for complete and comprehensive healthcare. This is not just about it being affordable, but also being available to everyone. I am proud to be endorsed by 1199 SEIU, the largest healthcare union in the United States. And they stand with me because they know that I believe how important healthcare is, that I believe in the passage of the New York Health Act. As a breast cancer survivor, I was fortunate enough to have health insurance when I was diagnosed at 32 years old. And I understand the need for equality in healthcare that ensures the right to access for medical care for all women's needs, for all people's needs. People should not have to make medical choices based on cost. I know that personally because when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, as a 32-year-old single woman, the recommendation for the treatment that was provided to me, they told me that they would most certainly kill my ovaries and I would have no chance of having children. I had to borrow because my insurance company did not cover the freezing of my eggs. So I personally understand how important it is to have good insurance, accessible insurance, affordable insurance. Pre-existing conditions, co-pays, deductibles, immigration status should not be a barrier to us having insurance here in this state. So yes, I will co-sponsor, I will advocate for passage.
Thank you. Skylar would like an additional minute.
Absolutely. So Tommy John, I'm disappointed to continue to hear you say that you do not support New York Health Act because on day one of your campaign, someone directly asked you on your Facebook page if you supported New York Health Act and you said that you did and would support it and sponsor it. So that's disappointing. Now, coming to some of the other points, this is really important. First of all, Laura, it's impossible for other people to come over to New York State to use our benefits because the bill only supports people who live in New York State. So if people are going to move here permanently, that's great. We're losing our population because of the high costs. I'd be happy to bring people over here. Plus, if the worst thing that's going to happen in New York is we save people's lives with our tax dollars, I'm okay with that. If you believe that you can get a Trump and Mitch McConnell if you believe that you can get Trump and Mitch McConnell to pass single payer healthcare, then you should probably be running for president right now, because most of the Democratic Congress does not even support it. The reason this has not gone through Albany is not because it doesn't work. It's because our elected officials are taking money from health insurance. And I'd still like to hear you and any of you say that you will not take money from the health lobby to make sure this gets passed. You can't say healthcare is a human right and not vote for this bill. I hope you'll all support it and make sure that everyone in New York has healthcare.
Thank you. Laura would like an additional minute.
Okay, so everyone is entitled to their opinion, but of course not their own facts. So to add to the record, the US Supreme Court has held that durational residency requirements involving essential services have been held unconstitutional under the Privilege and Immunities Clause. Now, this is something Skylar has argued, that there is a residency time period requirement in the New York Health Act, which there's not. So just to have the record straight, there are exceptions, of course, related to colleges where they allow individuals, where they will not allow individuals to benefit from our particular state universities. You actually would have to have a domicile here. So similar with the New York Health Act, what I'm saying is that if you have better benefits in New York State than surrounding states, there's a potential that other folks from the surrounding states are going to move to New York to benefit from our healthcare system, as opposed to it being federal. Everyone should benefit from the same great quality healthcare system. And if you decide to move to New York, you're now putting additional burdens on taxpayers here.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next question. And Skylar, you're going to be answering first. Governor Cuomo has proposed a package of police reforms he's calling Say Their Name. It includes repeal of New York Civil Rights Law 50-A, a law that provides for non-disclosure of police department disciplinary records, bans chokeholds, makes false race-based 9/11 reporting a hate crime, and makes the Attorney General an independent prosecutor for matters relating to the deaths of unarmed civilians caused by law enforcement. Does this package go too far or not far enough?
This package does not go far enough. There's a couple of things that we need to do in New York. The first thing that we need to do if we want any oversight is to repeal Measure 50A. Because Measure 50A in the New York State Civil Code means that when police misbehave, when something goes wrong, they can hide it in their police record and in their personal record, and it cannot be accessed. Every candidate needs to pledge to repeal 50A because that archaic measure protects the police from having any real oversight. I will not take money from police unions for this reason, because the police unions will unfortunately lobby heavily against this. We need to make sure that every officer in New York State is wearing body cams and must have them turned on at all times. We need to fix our criminal justice system and take on the prison industrial complex. Right now, if a black man's arrested, they're likely to be given a sentence 3 times harsher than their white counterpart. We need juror sensitivity training to fight implicit biases. I've been organizing around this. I just had a rally in Fort Jeff that was reported to have between 800 and 1,000 people there. And this is what I'm fighting for. We need real reform. It's great that we're banning chokeholds and doing those type of things because those are important steps, but it's not enough. It means banning tear gas on protesters. Because, by the way, tear gas is a chemical weapon. It's classified that way, and it's illegal in military use. So why can't we use it on American citizens? So we need to ban tear gas. Again, give police body cams. We need to reform our entire criminal justice system and end broken window policing. And this also begins by desegregating our communities. But any criminal justice package needs to include things that take on the prison industrial complex, reform the entire system, and protect the citizens of the people. We saw nationwide all these protests take place, and unfortunately, people were more concerned with people protesting than the fact that a black man was murdered. So every candidate, every elected official needs to be taking a stand to make sure that we're enacting real reform to protect the people of the United States. The police motto is protect and serve. If they want to protect and serve, they need civilian oversight.
Thank you. Tommy John?
First of all, I applaud the governor for his leadership and for him coming out with such changes. And I do support the repeal of 50A. I do not support opening up the entire personnel records of all government employees. I've been in union negotiations on the side of labor as well as the side of management. And I believe that certain transgressions absolutely should be made public. However, their name, their address, their kids' names, that stuff needs to be kept in a file. We want good police. We need the police. We need people to protect and serve. And our police, by and large, do a good job. When they are led well, when they have the proper training, they do well. And I support them. And I also support the governor and his efforts, particularly the independent nature of the Attorney General to undertake investigations for crimes against American citizens. New York has always been the progressive state, and we can lead the nation with these reforms. What we saw in Minneapolis was nothing less than a public lynching. It was absolutely horrifying. And we saw it. It was there for us, and it's happened throughout the land, and including in New York State. And these behaviors have to stop. The bad apples in the ranks of the blue, they need to be weeded out and really removed from the department. And our good officers and the good commanders need to be supported and kept in place. I support a national training for police, so police from different states are operating under the same set of guidelines and training so that we don't see what we saw in Minneapolis. So I applaud the governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
Will forever be haunted by the images of George Floyd being murdered by those sworn to protect him. It's absolutely sickening to me, and just another episode in our nation's history of structural racism. It's just not enough anymore to stand in solidarity with the Black community. Our outrage has to be channeled into significant, sustained, meaningful action to change policies and laws that deconstruct structural and systemic racism and the inequalities that exist in our healthcare system, in our criminal justice system, in our education, in housing. I support the Say Your Name legislation, the four corners of the governor's legislation, and additionally 6 other pieces that are set now. News came out a little while ago, 6 other pieces of legislation that are going to be voted on very shortly. So I have to say though, the overwhelming majority of law enforcement, the men and women in blue that are out there protecting us, 99.9% of them are doing a great job. They're protecting us every day, and they're saving our lives. And I run a crime victim center, so I can tell you firsthand that the individuals that are impacted by crime have been helped so much by law enforcement. So let's not forget the respect we have for those good cops. But we need legislation and changes immediately that are going to give us more accountability, restore confidence, respect, and the trust that we need to start to heal the relationship between the police and the community. We absolutely need greater transparency of prior disciplinary records, because as a plaintiff attorney, I can tell you, when the substantiated claims are on the record of a law enforcement officer or a teacher or somebody in government, if there is notice that those individuals were dangerous, that's notice. And what that's going to do is, well, what it does now, the law as it is, it shields them from civil claims, meaning it shields government from civil claims.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura. Sorry, Valerie?
Thank you. Definitely can't get this out in 2 minutes, but first, it goes beyond George Floyd, okay? Yes, everyone is agonizing over his senseless murder, but we're talking about centuries of oppression, systematic discrimination and racism, institutionalized racism that has continued to occur. There are so many lives that we've lost at this system that is in place that we must work tirelessly to change. So I support every one of the pieces of the legislation that is before the Assembly and the Senate. I actually have been at the rallies, handing out flyers, giving people information, because advocacy comes in different ways. We want to make sure that people understand that after they speak out, they know what their next action item is. Hold our senators that are in place now to the fire. Make sure that they are voting and passing all of this. But no, it is not enough. We must go beyond that. Body cams. Yeah, it's not enough to have body cams, but not discipline those who don't utilize it. Don't turn it on when you go out. I've had situations where the cars had cameras on the cars, and the police would pull over and they would not turn on their cameras. It needs to be enforced. When we talk about the culture, the police culture, we need to eliminate that culture. I've represented officers who have spoken out against other officers because of what they did, and they were basically ostracized. We had to bring lawsuits so that we can stop the retaliation. If we do not change the police culture, it doesn't matter if it's only 1% of those officers that are negative and that are not doing the right thing and have hate in their hearts. We need to change the police culture. Then we need to look at legal stuff, jury instructions. There are jury instructions that literally facilitate this improper behavior. We have situations where jury instructions are given saying that police personnel and law enforcement are not interested witnesses. That must be legislated. And there's a whole lot more when we have an opportunity to speak about that more. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Nora?
No justice, no peace. We've heard it, and we need to implement it. In my family, again, I'm one of 6. 2 of my family members have put in a full career in Suffolk County as police officers. As far as I know, they're squeaky clean, but I've heard horror stories throughout the years where people have literally gotten away with murder. There should not be any difference for any person, whether they are a movie star, a sports figure, anyone, police officers especially. That poor young boy that died in Nassau County in his garage after there were multiple accounts of him not being a fit parent because he was a police officer, got away with it. It's completely unacceptable. So we need to have transparency on every level for all professions and all people. There should not be any kind of set of rules for this group and a different set for that group. We need to be fair and honest and transparent across the board.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next question, Tommy John, you're going to be first. COVID-19 has shined a harsh light on differences in education received by students in wealthier and poorer districts, and it's raised many questions. Can taxpayers still afford to fund education at the same level as before? Do you support school district consolidation?
COVID-19 has illustrated a number of things as far as education goes. And the first thing is that students and teachers need to be in contact with one another. Let's dispense with the notion that online learning is the same as school education. And one of the things that also kind of underscored was the difference in the amount of the access to technology, both by the students and the schools. In addition to that, the individual education programs for students, it's been difficult. Now, as far as school districts in general and consolidations, I believe that educating children is the best things that we do here in New York State. I said earlier, I'm a 30-year teacher. My colleagues are very good at this. In fact, a lot of the most educated people in the country come from New York State, and they go other places. What we need to be doing is working with the equalization equation in New York State so that all of the districts, all of the 38 school districts in Senate District 1 gets equal amount of monies and resources, combination from the local government as well as the state governments. Now, so that there's a couple of parts to the question. As far as consolidation, I support it. I support the ability to allow schools to consolidate that have non-contiguous boundaries. I also believe that, we could be sharing services with our administration. As a school board member, I was the first one to bring Sag Harbor into the shared services program in Suffolk County so that we could go on to contracts for other municipalities. We need to be doing more of that, and school districts need to be working together at the very least or combining at the most. We have models to do it, and we should do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
My apologies, I just have to get this mouse there. So, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. COVID-19 has shined a harsh light on differences in education received by students in wealthier and poorer districts and has raised many questions. Can taxpayers still afford to fund education at the same level as before? Do you support school district consolidation?
Thank you so much. So we all know that education is the cornerstone to our children's future. And as Democrats, we have very deep investments in education. But even before COVID-19, students were just not getting the education that they deserved. And that's part of now what's happening with this social movement. We have seen systemic racism and structural racism, and that has shown us now that even before COVID, we had $36,000 per student for kids in districts that had more money and $13,000 for kids in districts that didn't have. We all talked about somehow or another, we're going to figure out a way to equalize that. But we have to equalize that because that's at the core of what the problem is in our communities now. Folks that are out there that are protesting. The core problem is education, healthcare, and also giving folks equal services. But you know, COVID did point out the problems that we had. We have kids that didn't have laptops, kids that don't have smartphones, that don't have internet technology. So what are those kids supposed to do? I mean, their parents aren't able to teach them at home. And when I had spoken to a reverend in one of the communities here that is traditionally underrepresented, he said to me, he didn't even know how those kids were getting educated. He thought maybe they were going to a friend's house. So right now we have to prioritize funding for education, and we can't move toward everything being remote because we need kids to be in school. They benefit so much from so many different services, including social services, including services from social workers in the school. So we have to ensure that all students have access to that in the classroom. Also, we also need to expand on remote learning. We need to be able to give kids the technology they need to learn at home, but also the internet. As I said earlier, a lot of kids don't even have the internet.
Thank you, Laura. Valerie?
Thank you. Education is so important. And I think that all of the opponents that spoke before me have reiterated that. I think that we need to make sure that our state representatives know that because education is so important, that they must not cut funding to education. And when you ask the question of whether we can afford to continue to fund it in the manner that we are, we need to go above what is happening because education is so important. We as a state need to tap into other revenue streams that we have not tapped into before. When we look at various pieces of legislation that have just sat around with respect to the state Senate for years. You know, we have the billionaire tax, which will bring in $10 billion per year or more. The pied-à-terre tax, which can bring in $650 million per year or more. Then you have the ultra millionaire tax that can bring in $2.2 billion per year or more. You have stock transfer taxes that are on the table. You have the fact that the state now has the ability to tap into the municipal liquidity funds. There's a lot of different ways aside from the federal government, which we should be pushing to give us money here as a state and be pushing, advocating aggressively for that. But we have other sources of funding that we should be tapping into to make sure that our education system is not cut. Yes, I do support the consolidation of school districts, but guess what? If we're not talking to our superintendents and we're not talking to our teachers and getting them on board so that we can actually push that legislation, it's a problem. This is one of those situations where you need experts at the table. You need the people on the ground at the table to be advocating with the legislators to say that our system is not working as it relates to education. You should not be educated based on your zip code. And when foundation aid is promised, it should be fulfilled. And the formula should be evaluated and created in a way that is actually providing equal funding to all of the districts. And we should not have to litigate to get the money. We have to litigate everything here in the state, and we should not have to do that.
Thank you, Valerie. Nora?
Yeah. So as I said on the Long Island Federation of Labor and heard other educators from NYSFT talking about this very convoluted, complicated mathematical equation for funding. I'm all about per capita. It's, you have this much money, you have this many students, and you would just give everybody a per capita funding that's equal in amount so that people will have a fair chance. What COVID did show us, not only was the fact that, as people mentioned, that not everybody has internet service or the luxury of having devices that could afford them the education. But also, we realized just how much our schools are feeding our children, feeding our young from the Office of General Services. They're providing breakfast, they're providing lunch, and in many instances, providing a dinner meal for them to take home. So schools are very important to physically be at. Also, the value of interacting with peers, and that is very important for their ability to evolve in general. Also, many parents were working. So rich, poor, or otherwise, parents were working, so they weren't able to educate many of the children in districts where it was the parents' responsibility to do so. So, I think the plan wasn't, of course, it was an emergency with COVID, but the plan was not well thought out. As far as consolidation, my eldest son has autism, and I think, providing the best of what each district can offer for consolidation would be good. My son actually was in Sachem at the time and was shipped out to Oakdale and Bayport. And he got the services that he needed for his situation, and working together amongst the districts, I think would be advantageous and cost savings.
Thank you. Skylar?
Nora, I like a lot of what you said there, and I just want to go a bit further into it. So my education plan has a lot of key points, but one of the one that I've been discussing since our first debate and that I've been discussing publicly is the way that we fund schools. Activists for education nationwide have a top priority, and that is to change the way that we fund schools away from a property tax. So this actually goes back to the New Deal, and it's the process of redlining, which separated specifically Black and white communities and kept minority communities poor. That's what we see current school districts actually stemming out of. And these school districts are not funded the same. It's unequal, it's unequitable funding. So what we need to do is stop funding schools solely based on property tax and start taxing people across the state, and change the way that we tax based on how much money they have. So the middle class would save money on their taxes. The over 120 billionaires that we have in New York State would not. And that money would allow us to better fund our schools, as well as give everybody an equal education, regardless of where they live. And it's not right that if you live in one district, that you're going to receive a not as good education compared to the district over for you because they can't afford the same resources, the same technology, the same books. That's not fair. Education is supposed to be an equalizer, and it's not right now. Nora, the other thing that I did like that you said that I want to go into again is the lunch aspect. Why do we have something called lunch debt in the United States? Why are kids being told that they cannot get a hot lunch that day because their family hasn't been able to pay the tab yet? So under my plan, using things like a wealth tax, using money from marijuana legalization, we're going to fund the schools enough to give every student at least 2 hot meals a day. And it'll save families money, but more importantly, it'll feed students. So I am in support of consolidating school districts. I want to say that before we finish. But the most important part of this is funding schools on a tax that's tiered across New York State, and it means that every student in New York can receive equal funding regardless of what zip code they live in and their family's wealth.
Thank you. We'll go on to the next question. And Laura, you'll answer first. New York State is not on track to achieve reduction in greenhouse gases from 1990 levels by 40% in 2030 and 80% by 2050. Considering this, and in light of the federal withdrawal from the Paris Accord and other international agreements, would you support a carbon tax? If so, what form would it take? If not, what alternatives do you support?
Thank you. I think climate change is a real and present threat and must be addressed immediately. And it's adversely affecting us in so many ways, economically, our public health, natural resources, and our environment. We have to invest in solutions that transition us from the fossil fuel industry to renewable, sustainable energy, such as maybe solar and wind power. I absolutely would be supportive of that tax. And I think that, you know, right now we're in a really scary place. In 2019, Cuomo signed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act to address and mitigate the effects of climate change by drastically cutting greenhouse gases, and also to divert the state's energy reliance to renewable sources and create green jobs to promote environmental justice across New York State. What's really frightening to me is that we have priorities that are related to folks being able to survive. We have a healthcare priority. We have a priority that obviously with COVID took up so many resources and has left us in a place where we passed a $177 billion budget that's on a revolving place. So in other words, we can't spend if we don't have the money. I'm deeply, deeply concerned that climate change and the issues surrounding climate change are going to be moved to a second or third priority. So in terms of the tax, I think that we could work with a lot of our qualified environmentalists to help us figure out what the best way to shape that tax would be. But what I do know is that we have only had, I think, one meeting for the development of our scoping plan. And that again is concerning me. So we have to work really hard to ensure that we have a voice in SD1 in the development of the scoping plan, and also that we get our fair share with the Restore Mother Nature Bond Act. It's $3.4 billion that's going to fight change, and part of a broader 5-year plan to invest $33 billion.
Thank you, Laura. Valerie?
Thank you. I first would like to agree with Laura in that we need to make sure we get our fair share of the funding. And I'm very happy that we finally passed the Mother Bond Restore Act. So now I wanted to just go into the actual climate tax. Yes, I support that. And I know that there have been efforts made on Long Island for such a tax. It wasn't framed in that fashion, but because of the pushback that came from various industries, it failed. I think it's important that we strategize, we bring together our environmental experts, we work together, we work with legislators and make sure that we push something like this that would allow for additional funding in these areas. We know that we must protect our sole source aquifer. We have to take the lead to promoting clean energy. The only way we're going to meet the state's goals is if our local governments are actually doing what they need to do and taking care of their business at home. As an elected official of the town of Brookhaven, I have been extremely active as the environmental protection liaison. I'm working with my colleagues and working with environmental advocates to make sure that we are meeting the goals with reducing greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's putting solar panels, on all of our facilities in the town of Brookhaven, or creating the community choice aggregate program, which provides opportunities to residents to have other ways of getting power, or if it's making sure that we have set up locations at the town so that those that want to charge their electric vehicles can. These are just some of the examples that we've been working on within the town. We have been a leader, and if all local governments do not step up and serve as leaders, we will never achieve the goal that is set forth by the state. So I'm proud to say that with the town of Brookhaven, we have served as that leader with respect to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and making sure that we're fighting climate change.
Thank you. Nora?
So with our carbon footprint, COVID probably took a pinky toe off for a little while. And the reason I bring this up is because of the many facilities that I represent: Department of Health, Department of Labor, DMV, State Insurance Fund, Tax and Finance. All these areas were permitted to have telecommuting. They were, it was a little rocky again in the beginning. They were set up with computers in their homes, and if they didn't have them, they were provided. And that reduced so much of our traffic. And adopting my puppy, I took a ride to Pennsylvania, and I was shocked to see New York City, to actually see New York City, because the smog was gone. So this change, a lot of businesses are very frightened and they're holding on to their brick and mortar, that they have to have their business in such a way. But I think we need to look into other alternatives as well. The solar, absolutely, I have it on my roof. The wind energy, I've gone to multiple presentations about it. You know, they're doing it in Europe, you know, fairly avidly, and they're reducing their carbon print. So again, I think it's a combination of other sources of energy and ways in which we can consolidate and reduce the amount that we're putting into it ourselves with just our everyday lives with vehicles and traveling.
Thank you.
You're
Skylar?
So climate change is not just a clear and present threat, it's the clear and present threat. A lot of times people will say things like, oh, we don't deal with this now, our grandchildren are going to be paying for it. No, we're paying for it right now. We're already reaching that tipping point. So I'm actually holding a forum on the environment tomorrow night at 7. Hope people will join us because we need to have better discussions on these issues. As for a carbon tax, absolutely, I support it, but it does not go far enough. We need to look at the way that we're behaving in our everyday lives and handling our everyday business. So while we're working to make public transit more accessible to people, we need to make sure that the same transit isn't polluting the environment. I have a plan that commits to ensure that all buses in New York State, that all public buses are carbon neutral by, I believe, the year 2031. Doing this will protect the environment, and it will make sure that we're not polluting it, not just for future generations, but for us. My clean water plan works to fix the water quality crisis that we're facing on the island. A bill just went through the Senate that would classify clean air and water as a human right and therefore make it constitutionally protected. And I fully support that bill for the reason being that that would allow us to use some emergency funds when it comes to this issue. And we need that. We need to fix and overhaul our water system. We saw that issue out in Southampton where the water supply was poisoned. I spoke to a voter out in Southampton actually who would not use his water supply because his white towels turn gray every single time they touch the water. That's unacceptable. Now, that's not anyone's fault except the corporations that are polluting our environment. And the reason that I say that is because we need stricter corporate regulations, especially in light of federal rollbacks. People are polluting our environment right now. So we need stricter regulations on pesticide use, on corporations, on everything that pollutes our environment. And then we need to take these steps towards renewable resources, building wind farms, building solar farms to make sure that we are moving away from fossil fuels. I, again, do not take any money from the fossil fuel industry, which is a key step that you need to take if you say that you're going to fight for the environment. You cannot fight for the environment and be funded by fossil fuels. So all of these things and much more that I don't have time to talk about in 2 minutes are steps that we need to take to help to save the environment and protect against the effects of climate change.
Thank you. Tommy John?
The United States Weather Service has warned that this year was going to be a particularly active year with storms. And we are seeing that here on Eastern Long Island. In fact, the Northern Hemisphere, North America, we've had 2 named tropical storms, and it's June. This is one of the effects of climate change. What's happening here on Long Island is that our waters are warming off of the eastern end of Long Island, changing the species in the water, and we are seeing much heavier storm events. The engineering for our roads is geared to handle 2 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. I don't think I have to tell anybody the kinds of storms that we are seeing. So New York State is going to have to take an active role in replacing that infrastructure and allowing the local governments to answer these challenges. That is what a senator does. We are going to work with the local governments to handle these things. As far as the environment, it's absolutely critical that we turn the ship around. I see this as somewhat of an opportunity in that we create a green economy. I believe that in the words of Senator Kaminsky, the southern shore of Long Island is the Saudi Arabia for wind power in terms of energy, not human rights. The water is shallow out there. We have a steady stream of wind, and we should be building wind farms out there, using American workers, creating a new industry for our young people, good, high-paying jobs for our young people here on Long Island. In addition to that, other things need to be done, and we need leadership on the state level to do this. In the town of Southampton, we brought community choice aggregation. We are in the 4th or 5th step of community choice aggregation, which means that the town will be able to buy energy from other suppliers other than PSE&G, promoting more green energy for us to purchase. And my time is done, so thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next question, Valerie, you'll be first. In the last session, the legislature passed a campaign finance reform bill. What is your opinion of it, and how would you modify it to make it better?
Well, first and foremost, I believe, can you hear me? I'm sorry, yes. I believe in campaign finance. I think that one of the things that has actually shown itself each and every time we have an election is that there's too much money in politics. You have too many situations where people are getting money from large donors. And I listened to one of my opponents, Skylar Johnson, and he speaks to where the money is coming from. As a local elected official, I have refused to take money from developers because of the fact that I'm working every day, all day with developers, making sure that we are properly zoning and that want to make sure that there is no conflict of interest. So I have not taken any money from developers since I came into office. And I think it's important that we separate those things, those that are apparent conflicts of interest. As it relates to campaign finance reform, I'm happy that New York is finally taking a step in the right direction. I think that we need to be making sure that our local municipalities are doing the same. I know Suffolk County most recently passed some form of campaign finance reform, and I would like to see that happen in all of our different municipalities.
Thank you. Nora?
So I think it's a good start. I'm personally repulsed by lobbyists and by big donors that think they own the candidate. And apparently, sadly, a lot of our bills that we've talked about tonight that should have been passed weren't, because people were controlled by their purse strings. And that needs to stop. That's the old way of thinking. That's a terrible way of thinking. And we need to have independent people. I'm proud to say that I am the candidate with the least amount of money raised. I talked to my friends and sent them letters to say, I realize you're in the middle of COVID here and you're out of work. And I don't expect you to send me anything. I expect you to share your stories about how I've touched your life and what difference I've made to your life. But I don't expect you to give me a dime, because I don't think that that's what a campaign should be predominantly about. It should be about the person, their ideals, and what they want to bring to the table. And what I want to bring to the table, as I said, is justice so that we can have peace.
Thank you. Skylar?
So first of all, Valerie, thank you for pointing that out too, because that's important, and that's what the two of us have in common too. Neither of us will take money from developers, from these big corporations, because it will not let you be an effective public servant if you're elected, because then you're beholden to those interests, and that's not right. So I want to thank you for doing that, first of all. Now, second of all, I want to say that my campaign is completely grassroots funded. I even had to call people for money recently. We've received over 100 small donations in the last 7 days. Because right now, we're being funded by people across New York and beyond who see hope in a campaign, who see hope in a progressive campaign. We need campaign finance reform right now. I was proud to testify in front of that commission that was created by Governor Cuomo about this issue, because right now, the current system favors the wealthy. A school teacher who's already struggling to get by can't go and run for public office most of the time unless they're independently wealthy, because they need to afford to take care of their own families. I'm not putting $100,000 into my campaign. I'm not fundraising from people who can afford to donate between $500 and $11,000. My primary donors are under $30, because right now, because I'm funded by the people. We need campaign finance reform and donor matching to make sure that anyone who wants to run can run, because we cannot be effective leaders and effective public servants if we're funded by big money and special interests, because our bills then, our legislation will always be geared towards those people. So yes, absolutely, we need to be funded. Absolutely, we need campaign finance reform to make sure that every person, not just in New York, but in the United States, is able to run, and also that we're not able to do things like put $150,000 into the campaign or get $11,000 donations, or at least get tens of $11,000 donations, because both of those things mean that you are not funded by the people. It's okay to get donations. It's okay if someone wants to give you a larger sum of money. However, it's not okay for that to be your only and primary fundraising source. If you're running for office, you need to have money coming from the people primarily, and that's it.
Thank you. Tommy John?
Thank you. I support campaign finance reform. New York City is doing it, and in New York State, we need to do it across the board. I also agree that some sort of matching donation by the state is in order so that we are funded by smaller donations throughout the district. And, you know, it's important because once you get into Albany or Washington, the lobbyist groups, they do line up and they are going to make their donations known. And, you know, these things don't come, you know, independently. And so the governor was right to do it. But I also want to give a shout out to the third parties, because part of this campaign finance reform commission that was formed also was formed for the third parties, and they raised the limits for third parties to get on the ballot. I think that needs to come back down to 50,000 votes in the 4-year term. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, you'll understand. But as far as campaign finance, I heard someone talking about those NASCAR races. You know, the advertising that they have on their collars and on their back. People in Congress and people in the state should have those labels on their suits, or, you know, whatever they're wearing, so people really understand who is in front of them and who is making the laws. Because, you know, when they go back to their office and they call whomever, or they get the calls from whoever, that absolutely cannot happen. And our elected officials have to do the work of the people. So thank you. I do support campaign finance reform.
Thank you. Laura? You're muted. You're muted.
My apologies. My apologies. I fully support campaign finance reform. In fact, I would support reform that would give us small multipliers for small dollar contributions, which data has shown has led to more diversity in our elected bodies. You know, I have, as you guys have learned in the very beginning of the presentation, in my beginning introduction, I have run a not-for-profit organization for over 20 years of my life, nearly 25 years. It's an organization I started from a room in my home, and I have had to fundraise in order for that organization to grow and thrive, and for us to be able to provide services to children who've been sexually abused, to domestic violence victims. I have had to work really hard to fundraise. So I've learned how to fundraise throughout my 25-year career. And what I have had to do is have had to do polling all over our district to try to ask folks to make contributions. But what I'm doing when I am asking for contributions is I'm getting to know our community. I'm getting to know the folks living in our community, and I'm also getting to know folks who are maybe in charge of certain businesses in the community. So it's developing relationships. However, I support public financing of campaigns so we can get rid of the nature of how special interests and super PACs can have a little control. But I can tell you right now, if I get a donation from a corporation, a PLLC, and even an individual, that will no way affect any decision I make about what's right for the people of Senate District 1, who I represent.
Skylar, would you like to use another minute?
Laura, I appreciate you saying that, but of course it'll affect the way that you represent the people of the district. If you're taking money from those people, you're going to want those same people to donate when you're up for re-election in 2 years. If you're taking money from those people, you're beholden to those people. And I appreciate your ability to fundraise, but if you're taking money from corporations, you're beholden to those corporations, especially things like developers, other special interest firms, anything that conflicts with the interests of the people. If you take money from them, you're beholden to them. Now, you don't need to reject money from individuals, but I would like to see more of your money coming from inside the district, from people who can donate small dollar amounts, not millionaires or people that can easily donate $5,000. Just some of it. I just want to see most of your money come from those sources. But no, and I know that you have something to say here, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, because you cannot effectively legislate if you're taking money from corporations. You cannot legislate against those corporations. And it's just not true that you can do that. And I hope that that's clear tonight.
Thank you. Laura, you have another minute? You're up, Laura.
Yeah, again, Skylar, you are certainly entitled
Letter.
to your, am I muted?
No, you're okay. You're good.
Oh, you are certainly entitled to your own opinion, but that is not the fact. The decisions that I make in my 25-year career have brought me to a position of tremendous respect and credibility in the community. And I don't think that you're in a position to question my credibility. But I would ask, you did have a $7,500 donation from one particular individual in your filing. And also I would like to add that, we all know that there was a robocall poll that you had done. And we all know that scientific polls are done not by robocall. And I understand when you're not in the front, or you're not fundraising the most, or you're not reaching voters the most, as we have to do as candidates, that sometimes you might take a step like that to try to bring more attention to yourself. And I understand why you would do that.
Thank
But
you.
I would also like
Thank
to
you.
say
Thank
that-
you. We're going to move on to the next question, and it will be the last question for the night. And Nora, you're going to go first.
Okay.
I think I mentioned at the beginning that for this June 23rd primary, all registered Democrats received an absentee ballot application in the mail to vote absentee by checking off temporary illness as the reason. Do you support current bills in the legislature to allow no excuse absentee voting?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think, again, being a nurse, I've taken care of many people in their homes who are not able to physically get out, but are completely cognitively aware and want to be involved. And, I think there should be no excuse that somebody from the comfort of their own home cannot vote. There should not be an excuse. I'm really happy that they did that this year with COVID, because I think that alleviated a lot of people's anxiety about going into public, and possibly, especially elderly. Where I live, I'm in the middle of Leisure Village, Leisure Knoll, Leisure Glen. None of those people want to go out and be exposed to anything at this point in time. So all of those people in those areas, I've heard back from them that they're thrilled that they got that invitation to get their ballot to their home, and they can do that. And I think going forward, that should be the wave of the future. And, I think possibly we'll actually have more accurate polling.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Skylar?
Here, so would you just mind repeating the question? I want to make sure that I got it correct.
Sure. For this primary, all registered Democrats received an absentee ballot application in the mail to vote absentee by checking off temporary illness as the reason. Do you support current bills in the legislature to allow no excuse absentee voting?
I do, but that's not enough. So first of all, every person who is eligible to vote in New York State should automatically be registered to vote. And every person in New York State should have the ability to mail in their ballots every single year to make sure that situations like this do not arise. So yes, we always need no excuse absentee voting. However, that's nowhere near enough. So again, we need automatic registration, and we need people to be able to mail in their votes, because both of those measures will allow us to properly go around our elections and allow everyone equal access to voting. A lot of people really don't know the process behind absentee ballots, and unfortunately, I believe that once this year passes and everyone's not getting applications, it's going to go back to that. So once this year passes, we need to continue the process of making sure that every single person in New York State who is eligible to vote in an election can mail in a vote. It's extremely important that we do that.
Thank you. Tommy John?
Voting is the only function in the US Constitution that is actually articulated for citizens to do. Now, I know we have our responsibilities to be active in government, but it literally is written in the Constitution that citizens should vote. And I fully support that if you have a Social Security card, you should be registered to vote. I believe in same-day voter registration. But if we have the first thing, we don't even need registration. I believe that citizens in the it should be made as easy as possible for all of us to vote. Voting is the great equalizer along with education. I believe that making it easier to vote will end things like, will help end things like systemic racism and income inequality. If people get to vote, they have more say in their government. And I'm talking about all levels of government, federal down to town, village, and school board. People should be registered to vote. And in addition to that, having a no excuse absentee ballot, there are many states in the country that have mail-in elections and they work just fine. The military has been doing it since we've had a military and it works fine. So do I support it? I wholeheartedly support it, and I would vote yes. I would even sign on to sponsor the legislation. So thank you.
Thank you. Laura? You're muted.
The Republicans will do absolutely anything to suppress our voting. I am absolutely in favor of making voting as easy, simple, and accessible to as many people as possible. I support same-day registration, no excuse absentee balloting, and speeding up the time it takes for party enrollment changes to take effect. It is, as the other candidates have said, this is the way that we get to select those individuals that we know that are going to be most representative of us. As an advocate in the community for over 20 years, I've worked so hard to affect change to protect our most vulnerable, and have worked with local, state, and federal lawmakers that have genuinely been engaged. And those individuals that are not engaged, eventually people will vote them out. So I am fully supportive of us doing everything possible to ensure voting is as easy, simple, and accessible to as many people as possible.
Thank you. Valerie?
Yes, thank you. I absolutely support same-day registration, automatic registration, even better, as well as no excuse ballots. COVID has pushed the state and other places across the country to do things that have been blocked for so long. There is no reason to turn back now. We've had this opportunity now to actually engage in this absentee ballot process that is technically no excuse. And we need to make sure that we continue there, but we cannot stop there. We need to make sure that every opportunity, every piece of legislation that can be put forward that will give people the most access to voting, that we make sure we put those in place. When New York passed the early voting legislation, as an elected official in the town of Brookhaven, I was one of the first of my colleagues to say, we can do it at town hall, but the fact that you have early voting in one location in the town is disastrous. It's not giving access the way that it should. So we need to continue looking at ways that we can increase access to voting rather than saying, okay, we've given you a little bit and that's enough. This is not enough. What has happened during the last legislative session, and now because of COVID, it is opening a door for us to continue to move forward to give our residents and our voters the most access to make sure that they get their candidate in office.
Thank you. Nora would like an additional minute.
I just had one criticism about the way it was done this year. If we could have rolled back the time, I would have liked if they did not send offer for the absentee ballot. If they just sent everybody the absentee ballot right from the get-go, would have saved a lot of money. And also to make sure that every ballot that can come back has the postage paid, so that no one is running short if they don't have a stamp or cannot afford a stamp.
Thank you. We're going to go into the closing statements now. So each candidate has a minute to make a closing statement. And Skylar, you're first.
Thank you so much. So we had a lot to discuss tonight, and as you can tell, a lot of these candidates, we have differences, and I want you to look into not only the differences, but the policy behind it. I not only have the policy to win the primary, I have the policy to appeal to voters in the general election and then to be an effective lawmaker in Albany. I'm running a campaign that's for the people. Once again, I'm grassroots funded. I have one donation that's above $2,000. And what we're doing is making sure that we're beholden only to the people. If you elect me, I'm going to make sure that I'm delivering for all New Yorkers, regardless of backgrounds. Also, if I'm on your ballot in November, I'll be able to get young people out to vote to beat Lee Zeldin and to beat Donald Trump. If you're interested in reading more about my campaign and hearing more about the relatively short discussion that we had tonight, please visit my website. It's skylarforsenate.com, and you can read more about my many plans right there. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you'll visit me at my website and learn more about the campaign.
Thank you. Tommy John?
Thank you. I entered public life to address issues and solve problems. I've been in government for years, different levels of government. I understand government. I taught government. I lived in this district my entire life. I've worked in this district my entire life. My parents are from here. My children are growing up here. I know this district, and the district knows me. I would be proud to be your senator. I am endorsed by all 3 Democratic supervisors in Senate District 1. I am endorsed by Catherine Mulcahy, our Sag Harbor mayor. I am endorsed by Jeff Sander, our North Haven mayor. I am endorsed by Congressman Tim Bishop, former Congressman Tim Bishop, and boy, do I miss that man in that position. And I'm also endorsed by the New York State United Teachers. I'm proud to have my colleagues on this side. And as your senator, I pledge to you that I will deliver the services that are needed here in the 1st Senate District. If we are looking at budgetary cuts in Albany, I am going to be a strong voice in the room to deliver for us here on Eastern Long Island. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
District 1 is basically evenly divided into thirds, Dems, Republicans, and Indies and blanks. I can beat Colombo in the general election. I'm a social worker and attorney. I have a 25-year history of serving our most vulnerable and helping pass local, state, and legislation. My experience, reputation, and my name recognition will resonate with the Indies, blanks, and Republican women who I can persuade to vote for me. I have raised more money compared to any other candidate who is raising money. I did not put well over $170,000 into my campaign. We have a very expensive general election in front of us. A great fundraiser like me can help the towns fundraise for local candidates. I'm respected and relied upon, and that's why I've received endorsements from National Organization for Women, Presiding Officer Rob Calarco, Deputy Presiding Officer Kara Hahn, Legislator Kate Browning, Eleanor's Legacy, 9 labor unions. I would ask you to consider who can beat Colombo in the general election, and I'm hoping for your support.
Thank you. Valerie?
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Charles, for giving us this opportunity. Everything that I have encountered and experienced in my lifetime has brought me to this time and space, running for Senate District 1. From advocating for healthcare, for my immigrant grandmother and aunt that I spoke of earlier, to helping create a not-for-profit when I was growing up in my Queens community to make sure that the children of the community had an opportunity to stay off of the street, give them productive things to do, and build relationships with the police, to going to law school, to fight for civil rights because I saw what was happening in my community, to being the first Black to ever serve on a town board, the 2nd largest town in the state, since the 1600s, being the only Democrat for the past 5 years, and delivering for my district over and over and over again. What that says is that I know how to work across party lines, and I do it effectively. I bring my skill, my experience and my passion to everything that I do. And I promise that I will not only be an advocate in this district, but will be your champion in Albany. I have been endorsed by 1199 SEIU, IBEW 1049, Long Island Environmental Voters Forum, True Blue New York, PEER, Brookhaven Town Democratic Executive Board, New York State Assemblywoman Kimberly Jean-Pierre, former Suffolk County Legislator Vivian Valoria Fisher, Moms Demand Action, Gun Sense Candidate Distinction, and Mayor Garant and the Working Families Party. Sorry if I went a little over. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Nora?
So I'm very empathetic, whether I became a nurse because I'm empathetic or vice versa. As I told you, I grew up the last of 6. I know I grew up poor. I grew up as a physically abused child. I grew up as a sexually abused child. I was married and then became a single mother for 11 years with my 4 children, working 3 jobs to support them. So the passion that brought me to run is that I can relate to so many people in this district. And the endorsements that I have are from the people whose lives I've touched. And that's all I think we need to get us through this.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all the candidates for their candor and how they've answered all these questions and given us information on their positions. I want to thank Charles Certain and CTV at Southampton for his technology support, for making this live, and for putting it out on YouTube for everyone else to watch. And I want to thank you, Barbara, for your timing, and all of the other members of the league who helped pull this together. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. Now it's your job. Get out there and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good night.
You-